Oh, it's recording. Hello. This is a short talk on something that's called the Vajra body. The Vajra body, it's not something that materially exists like your bones and muscles. It's more a way of experiencing what we call the body, the great mystery called the body. And it goes under many names and it crops up in different cultures. I've often called it the subtle body. And I think Reggie Ray calls it the energy body or the body of awakening. And it's useful to cultivate. It refers to something most of us already sense, that is the way that the body starts to appear when you bring awareness to it over a long period of time. In meditation, I mean. And you get increasingly aware of many different areas and kinds of sensations in the body as meditation progresses. It's one of the ways that meditation practice grows and builds up. So in a way, what I'm talking about is a recognition of that. For example, the crown of the head. Take your attention up to the crown of your head. It feels from the inside, it feels in a very particular way. Yeah, the throat, the whole throat area, the base of the tongue, the pit of the throat. From the inside, feels in a very particular way. It's partly emotional, and that's definitely the case in the heart area, and also the area around the navel, area around the sex organs, the area right down the base of the body at the pelvic floor, and these all feel in a very, very particular way. And of course, these are the traditional locations, the power places of the energy centers. Sometimes they're known as chakras. Chakra being Sanskrit for a wheel and suggesting a dynamic, kind of dynamic center, like a dynamo, if you like. And these energy centers are kind of strung along what's called the central channel. So, right, the central channel. The central channel is basically the experience of the core, of the inner core of the body, which extends from the anus to the crown, and especially the what was once the fontanelle, the soft fontanelle at the crown. And it's conceived of as a straight line between these 2 points, or rather more like a tube or an opening, but like an opening that extends all the way. And even more accurate, it's more like a sense of openness rather than a tube. A sense of openness that extends out inside the body, inside the space of the body, and forms a kind of channel of awareness right through the body. As I said at the beginning, it comes about through exercising the imagination. But once you've been doing that for a while, it's no longer imaginary. It's something does actually come about through the imagining. Historically, the central channel and the system of chakras and the energies that move between the chakras along the central channel is a phenomenon that arose in some mysterious way along with the development of the Vajrayana phase of Buddhism. And there are specific practices that use it. The prime example I know is the Tummo practice, the generation of psychic heat, practice that Milarepa used to do. A more familiar example to all of us, I think, is the inner body visualization in the different sadhana practices, where as for example, we visualize ourselves as Vajrasattva with Om, Ah, Hum at the crown, the throat, and the heart. And this whole phenomenon of inner body practice and working with energy, it's probably evolved over a very, very long time indeed. And perhaps among the wanderers, the shramanas, the great open movement out of which the Buddha's own movement grew, perhaps around those wandering sadhus were passed or evolved among these kind of practices. And we see echoes of this kind of practice in Taoism and in some aspects of the Greek gymnasium, which was contemporary with the Buddha. Very little is written in the Indian tradition. Later on, it's mainly explored, and it's still practiced very much so, in Tantric Buddhism, in Jainism, and in Shaivism. However, it's definitely a Buddhist tradition in its own right. And so is Hatha Yoga, really. A lot of us in the West do Hatha Yoga. I do kind of Iyengar style, probably because of the generation I'm part of. But I think in Triratna there's sometimes a very slight unease because Hatha Yoga is associated with Hinduism, and Hinduism for Buddhists is a no-no, it seems. However, the first documentation that we know of about methods that later formed the traditions of Hatha Yoga is in a Buddhist work. And this Buddhist text is the Amrita Siddhi, written, it's not an early text, it was written in the 11th century, in the second phase of the establishment of Buddhism in Tibet. And in these practices, there is a very complex history, it seems, and quite a lot of mutual influence of especially Shaivism, Tantric Shaivism, and Buddhism. But that the background for all that is not just monastic Buddhism. I'm not sure if very much of it was monastic Buddhism in the beginning, at least. It mainly took place in the huge perimeter of lay Buddhist practice around the monasteries. And you always get this phenomenon. It's just the same as what we've got. All the fringe Dharma practice we have. There's a lot of practice going on outside the order, and there has been for many, many years. There's a large outer circle of loosely connected friends, mitras, ex-mitras, their contacts, and ex-order members and their contacts, and they all somehow practice the Dharma, and that mutual practice extends out even further into society. And many of these people are substantial practitioners as well, and even though they're not formally connected to the order. So just in the same way, in the 11th century as well, there continued outside the monastic order many advanced lay practitioners, all contributing to a highly creative fringe of practice. And in fact, at that time, it was the fringe was where the real action was happening. And notably, within that fringe, there were the siddhas and their disciples. For example, Naropa, Marpa, and Milarepa, and hundreds of thousands of others. And the siddha, the Virupaksha, who is associated with the Amrita Siddhi text. So this kind of bodywork is likely to have had a very long history, even possibly going back long before the Buddha. And what emerges now that's useful for us, I think, are the practices of the inner body that many of you know through Reginald Ray's work. And these enable deep mindfulness. Deep, there's something about them that encourages a deep experience of mindfulness and an acceptance of feeling and sensation in the body. They have the effect of calming and also opening the mind. They also offer lots in terms of insight, because they touch on the very nature of the body. They touch on the life and death aspect of the body. They touch on aspects, for example, like the fact that we have been born. We have been through the trauma of life in the womb and then birth and early childhood and all the rest of it. And at the end of life, death. Those aspects of the body. And also the body's elemental nature, rather as we reflect in the 6 elements practice. When I say elemental, I don't just mean physical. The elements describe the way we experience forms like our body. The body in the Buddhist view is not seen as matter, as made of matter, external to a subject. The 4 elements make up the rupa, or the form samskara. The form skandha. And as I say, form is always in Buddhism an experience. And it's an experience that continues without stopping from conception, life in the womb, birth, life, and death. And it touches on something very profound in us. Okay, of these inner body methods, I've found several very useful. First, there's practices that connect with the earth. Secondly, there are practices that work with breathing in the body. And third, what are called central channel practices. And there's also loads of overlap between these 3. And the ones that I do of these are, they partake of all 3, actually. They're all sparked off by the breathing. They all connect to the earth, and they all engage the central channel. But I want to look at them first from these 3 different angles. Let's close that door. Okay. First, there are the practices in which we connect to the great earth. To me, this relates to bodhicitta. And I hope you see the same connection, because when I think of the vastness of the earth, its size compared with my size, I can't help thinking of all the lives going on there. A long time ago, it's getting on for 20 years now, I had a phase where I was quite involved in pagan ceremonies. And there's a lot that's really existential in the concerns of the kind of neo-paganism that I got involved with. And I did a lot of sweat lodges. And these sweat lodges made a bond with the earth that I will never forget. So this ceremony is done nude or with minimal clothing, with a dozen or more others, men and women. And there's a leader, and every aspect of the ceremony is ritualized. You enter ritually. And you all end up packed around the walls of quite a small tent. And the tent is covered with many coverings, so it's completely dark inside. You're sitting there, and then into the center of the tent, I brought these red hot rocks. And these rocks are so bright in the darkness. And they've been heating for hours on the ritual fire outside that a while ago you were circumambulating. And when the rocks come in, this is very dramatic. Suddenly it's heat, it's hot, and it's dangerous, because those things are just a foot or two away from your naked body. And then water is, the doors are closed, and water is poured on the hot rocks, and it becomes full of hot steam like a sauna. It is intense, and it's claustrophobic. In the shamanic sense, it's a real ordeal. But going through some of these ceremonies, that it gives you an experience of life and death that is deeply moving. You don't forget, and it creates a strong bond with humanity and with the earth, because you're inside this tent that's like a womb. You're naked with your brothers and your sisters, and it's pitch dark. It's really as though somehow you're inside the earth. And people speak. It's like utterances are wrung out of them in the heat of this ordeal. It's not that it's intensely painful or anything. It's just quite an intense experience. And people also sing songs. You have rounds of singing, and then individual people will say various things. So there are songs, and here's a Sweat Lodge song I remember. Into the earth we go, into the earth we know, into the earth we go, into the earth we know. Hold my hand, sister, hold my hand. Hold my hand, brother, hold my hand. Into the earth we go, into the earth we know, into the earth we go, into the earth we know. Hold my hand, sister, hold my hand. Hold my hand, brother, hold my hand. Well, I tell you, I've never forgotten this. It moves me deeply. And this is the feeling, the whole point of telling you this. This is the feeling I get from the earth breathing, something of this at least. And the method is, you breathe into the earth. And it's almost as though you breathe in the earth itself. You breathe in the people of the earth and the spirit of the earth, and even it's a two-way thing, because it's the breath coming in and going out. It's almost even the earth itself breathes you. And the relationship with the earth is almost even like a bit like a mother, in the way the mother relates to a child in her womb, or breathes with a child in her womb. So like this, you can't help but reflect, all beings, including all human beings, are breathing, and the earth represents the whole of life in this way. So in these practices, we breathe into the earth, and empathize very deeply with the earth. And we allow the earth to come into us. And there's some visualization as well inside the body of this connection with the earth. There's a connection you make with the inner body and the depth of the earth that's done through the central channel. You know, we imagine each breath going into the earth and into the earth down here, and then drawing up from the earth and also up the central channel and down the central channel and out. So there's a sense that the core of our body connects to the core of the earth. Okay. And then the second category, breathing into the body. Lots of you I know these practices already through Reginald Ray's writings. All of us, all the members, started with the mindfulness of breathing practice. And the mindfulness of breathing does awaken a sense of the inner body. With these Vajra body practices, you also bring to life in some way the central channel. And part of that is visualizing it. And another part of it is directly feeling the energies in the body that it make it up. For example, around the different chakras that I mentioned at the beginning. So these two different aspects of the central channel, that is visualizing it and feeling it, they combine to produce a different kind of awareness of it in the body. And I described it earlier as a sense of openness that extends out inside the space of the body and forms a kind of channel of awareness right through the body. There are many of these practices. There's a huge variety of them. But one I've found helpful, I mean, I found this a really amazing practice, is breathing into the navel chakra, the navel energy center. So you do this by taking your attention to that's the spot where that is. You have to find the spot. And then having done that, you just focus on the way the breath is in that area, because when the breath can be found in any part of the body, and that you can find the resonance of the breath in that area, and you do that. And then you direct the attention so that the breathing penetrates a single point at the center of the navel chakra. And this focus for the breathing can be surprisingly absorbing. I'm not quite sure why it is, but it really is. Reggie Ray calls it yin breathing, as opposed to yang, I suppose, because it is very, very receptive. You know, it's the opposite of kind of very forced breathing. It's the opposite of that kind of breathing. It's very, very receptive and open. And another very effective breathing method is to imagine breathing through all the pores of the skin, all the many pores of the skin simultaneously. And this method, I really like this one too. It engages the entire body all at once, all at the same time. You know, it doesn't matter at what stage the actual breath is, because the air is coming in evenly through every single pore, back, front, up, upside, downside. And this produces a very refined and peaceful and gentle kind of breathing. Hopefully we'll get to try this one. Okay, then in the third category, the central channel meditations, there are various kinds. And there's, first of all, what's known as the purification breathing. And there's also what's known as the vase breathing. So I'm going to go into those two. The vase breath, it's a hatha yoga practice. And it involves locking the breath in at the navel from below, from above, and from the center, and holding it there for a short while. And this is the kind of practice that's described in the Amrita Siddhi. And also, it's common to the tradition Milarepa was part of. And this three-way lock, or bandha, to use the Hatha Yoga term, makes a kind of shape, makes a pot shape, as it were. It's a bit like a vase. And when the hold is gently released, the airs that come down at the sides of the center, that move up and down the sides of the central channel, these can more easily enter the central channel and rise up it to the crown. And they release energy at all the chakra points along it. And so you get into this, the experience is different for everybody, but it often seems to be extremely useful in ways that are rather hard to explain. But you can understand it through practicing it and getting some experience for yourself. Just to give one simple, very mundane example of some of the benefits. I had problems for years with blocked nostrils, forcing me to breathe through my mouth or breathe in a very partial way. I still get that, but this pretty much always fixes it. And what happens with the vase breathing, when that release comes, it just seems to open up all the channels, basically. It seems to stimulate the whole system of inner air movement. And then the other method I mentioned in this category of the central channel meditations is the purification breathing. And again, this is rather hard to explain in terms of a rationale, but at the same time, it can be very effective. And it's often done as a preparation for the vase breath. But it works also very well as a standalone practice. So in this, you visualize the central channel, or you recollect the central channel, you connect with the central channel and the two side channels. And the breath is imagined as entering one or another of the two nostrils, ascending up to the crown before descending to the navel energy center. That's on the in-breath. So goes down. And just that first bit, actually, just the ascent to the crown, that can be a practice in its own right. When you focus on the sense of the brain being slightly oxygenated by the air in the upper nasal passages and the sinuses, you can feel that, and it's a rather exhilarating and blissful feeling. Anyway, just continuing what I was saying, so going up, and then in the descent to the navel center, that breath along a single nostril channel, once the breath gets down there, it crosses over to the other side and then rises up in the out-breath to be expelled through the opposite nostril, like that. I think it's helpful to feel the breath more than imagine it, but there is an element of imagination, just taking the breath up and down. So you need to be, it's good if you're well connected to the physical experience, the touch of the breath. And also, here's a tip. Experience the breathing as it enters and moves through the body in this, not as some kind of fixed point that goes up and down, but it's more like a single long column of air that all moves at the same time in a sort of cloud-like way. It's all moving, but in one column, as it were. I think that's a more helpful way of visualizing it. more relaxed. It's a more relaxed way of visualizing it. Okay, in terms of method, one usually does 3 breaths on one side, and then 3 on the other, and then there's a third set of 3 breaths that are taken down both side channels simultaneously. So there are 3 rounds. It's quite often called the 9-fold purification breathing. So there is one breath goes in, say, through the left nostril, up, down, crossing over, and on the out breath, out through the other nostril. That's 1. And you do that 3 times on that one side. Then you cross over and go from the right nostril, up, down, cross over, out breath, up, and out through the opposite nostril. And you do that 3 times. And then in the final 3, you take them through both nostrils simultaneously. You go up and down. And very often that leads on to the vase breath, but you don't have to do that. You can just go up and down and up. Or it can be up and down and up the central channel, possibly. But it is quite adequate just to do up and down and up again. Okay, so we're nearly finished, actually. There are a very large number of variations of this 9-fold purification breathing. Some people hold the nose on one side, block off so they can more clearly experience the breath coming in through the other nostril. I don't do that. I find it creates a bit too much movement in the body to hold my hand up here and have to put it down again. I much prefer just to be in meditation posture and give all my attention to the process, to the inner process. And I find if I'm relaxed and open enough, it's quite easy to feel the breath in one nostril and take it from there. Okay, that is my talk. And I hope it's useful. And in a while, I'll do a practice video on the same topic so we can do it together. Thank you very much.